All right, we get things rolling on the Krug Show. Hope everybody's having a good day today, Thursday, May the 4th. And with us to talk a little 49er football is Jordan Elliot from Niners Nation. The draft has happened. The rookie minicamp is around the corner. And Jordan is with us. Hey, Jordan, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. It's been a fun week, catching up with all these prospects, getting to know them all a little bit better, and I'm excited for the next stage of the offseason.
What do you think of the draft without me leading you in any direction?
I liked it. I think, again, you have to come into this with reasonable expectations. When your first pick isn't until 99, they obviously moved up to 87. So when you're working with the ammunition they had in terms of picks and realistically where they'd be able to move up, I really liked what they did. I think the most polarizing thing, obviously, was the Jake Moody pick, which is hilarious. Thinking about, coming out of a draft for a team that's good, the biggest talking point, it's kind of, taking a kicker as high as they did. And, I have mixed feelings about it, but I can understand the logic in doing it. It's just a matter of it kind of has to pan out or else it might look pretty bad a couple years down the line. But I really like some of the picks they made, and I thought that they did a good job of stockpiling depth, because I don't think there really was a need to address outside of maybe safety. That's going to be an immediate thing in the next year and a half or so. And I thought they did a great job with Jair Brown. I think that was a fantastic pick. But overall, it wasn't a very exciting draft, I thought, because of where they were picking. But given where they did pick, I thought they came away with some solid prospects that can be, pros in the NFL. Whether that means, they got superstars and they got another 5th round, 7th round gem again, I don't know. But I definitely think that they have some guys who can contribute on an NFL team for the next couple seasons.
It was a frustrating draft in some ways because you watched a lot of teams around the league get better. And you watched the 49ers they waited around a lot. Obviously, they waited the whole first night. They waited most of night 2. They didn't have a pick at the beginning of round 4. So it just seemed like it was a lot of watching these other teams get better. And the only other complaint I would have is that it just seems like every year the 49ers will somehow take a situation that where there isn't a need and kind of create a need and then need to fill that need. In this case, why not just give Robbie Gould an extra $500K? I mean, did you really see regression? The guy's never missed in the postseason. I guess maybe he just had no interest in being here. And if maybe that's the case, so maybe this is why they've arrived at Jake Moody. Otherwise, it's like, hey, you had a 3rd-round pick. You could have used a great edge rusher. There were a lot of terrific players on the board at that point, and you went kicker. I'm fine with it as long as he's a good kicker long-term, and not Roberto Aguayo, who was a 2nd-round pick and bounced out of the league in 1 year. But I wanted to see Robbie Gould come back and have that pick be used on a foundation piece football player, maybe on the line of scrimmage. And instead that's a kicker. So that we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Maybe Gold just told them, hey, look, I don't know where I'm going to play this year, but I'm not playing with you. So who knows? We don't know the situation and how it shook out. What do you like about Brown, and do you think there's a chance he could take over the free safety role away from Tayshaun Gibson maybe as soon as week 1?
I definitely think that it'll be a challenge based on the way Gibson played last year. But the thing I like the most about Brown is just the play speed that he has. I think one thing that gets lost in all the evaluation process is combine numbers come out or pro day numbers come out. And far too often, I think that's what dictates the narratives on how quick some of these guys are, how explosive some of these guys are. I wrote an article for Niners Nation on Monday. I spoke with Penn State, the associate head coach who also worked with the DBs, Terry Smith. And he had shared with me some of the GPS tracking data that they did. And he said that Brown was consistently a guy that was at 20, 21 miles an hour. He had a max speed over 21 miles an hour on game day. So he is a guy that when he's in pads and he's out there on the field, he has that explosion and that speed that you maybe wouldn't see with the 40 time. His 40 time ranked 16th out of the 18 safeties who ran at the combine. But when you turn on the film and you look at the GPS data, he's a guy who plays much quicker than that time would indicate. And I think the football IQ is there. And I think that he's a guy who has a great understanding of angles, knows when to attack, knows when to really hit that extra gear and use that explosiveness that he has. And I just think he's a really smart football player. And all the things I heard from the coaches he had at Penn State was that he was a guy who was busting his ass in the film room, a guy that was, working his tail off to game plan every week and figure out different ways to attack opponents. And I think that that's the kind of stuff that it's really hard until you hear firsthand from the people who experienced it, how much a guy is really going to do it. And I know sometimes it's, it's cliche. You'd like to think that everybody's at that level is putting in that time, but I've learned very quickly doing this, that's not the case. And I think that the 49ers not only got a talented player, but a very high character football guy who's going to put in the time off the field to make sure that what he's doing on the field is the best he can be.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need it because Emmanuel Mosley and Jimmy Ward were leaders back there, and you lost both of those guys. So they needed not just a young player, they needed a culture player, a leader, an alpha in their secondary. I know Hafanga's that in some ways, but they needed another guy like that. I think Jair Brown can be a really good NFL player. What do you think of the tight ends? They took Cameron Latu in the 3rd round. They took Braden Willis in the 7th round. I've seen some great blocking numbers on Willis. I love Willis's film too. I mean, he just is so confident in the middle of the field. He's dragging defenders. He's fighting for extra yards. You can really see his hands. You can see his, I don't know if he's got great speed. To me, it's more what I loved about Willis is the hands and kind of the courageousness and the competitive fire across the middle. I mean, this guy just is not going to be denied. Latu is interesting too. Bigger guy. I think there's a lot of potential there for sure, but his numbers at Bama were not great. What did you think of the 2 tight ends?
So I think first off with Latu, because I think the consensus I've seen from a lot of people is like, why did they should have been flipped almost? Like a lot of people I think thought Willis should have been the first tight end taken, with Latu being the guy that they take at the end of day 3. I think the biggest thing with Latu is that he was a defensive end coming out of high school, not just a defensive end. He was one of the most highly recruited defensive ends in the country when he went to Alabama. So I think he's a guy where they're just banking on the upside and the potential, where they know that he's still learning the position in a way that some of these guys who've been playing it for years just aren't. And I think they're betting on the upside there. So I think that's a pick where you're kind of betting on your own development more so than, hey, this guy came in, he dominated, he has the production in college, and we feel like the floor is very high there. I think it's a situation where they're banking on the ceiling being a little bit higher. And then Willis is a very intriguing player to me because they used him all over the place at Oklahoma. He was playing in the wing. He was playing in the backfield. He was playing inline. He was playing out wide. They even used him as the wildcat quarterback. It's pretty neat, actually. Their tight ends coach at Oklahoma, Joe John Finley, he used to play for the 49ers. He was on the practice squad from 2008 to 2010. So he spent 3 years with the team, and I had the chance to chat with him yesterday. And the thing he kept talking about with Braden Willis was that the guy had a work ethic that he wasn't accustomed to working with college athletes. And he said everything that he's been doing for years in terms of preparation and just working on his own craft was at a level that you would expect out of an NFL player and not a college player. He told me that the guy caught 10,000 balls each summer the last 2 years. He was joking, but he's like, he wore out our jugs machine. We had to pull the jugs machine off the field because the guy was going to break it because he was out there using it so much. And I think that's, again, kind of falls in line with what the 49ers are looking for. When you're picking on, 247, wherever he went at the end of the 7th round, I think you're at a point where you can't really get too caught up in trying to find a guy who's going to be a long-term starter or be a guy who's going to be this exceptional talent. I think you need to find guys that are going to bring something to the table that are going to allow them to contribute to your football team. And I think the biggest thing with Braden Willis is the work ethic. And then just as you mentioned, that hunger, he had mentioned that when Oklahoma's offense needed to get a yard or two, they threw Willis back there as a wildcat quarterback because he's like, I knew if somebody was unblocked and he had to get through a defender, he was going to get us a yard or two. So he's a really intriguing player to me. And I think that he can kind of fill that role that we've seen Ross Dwelley fill, where if something were to happen to any of the frontline starters, he could be your emergency fullback. He could be your emergency, offensive weapon, whatever you want to label Kyle Juszczyk as, because he not only has experience doing it, he thrived and did a really good job at it at a big-time school at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, and then 33.5-inch arms for Willis, 514 receiving yards last year. I could see a guy who could really be a threat as a receiver. And not only that, if you look at the types of catches Willis has made, there's a wide array of different type catches. He's got a pretty big catch radius, and I think he could get bigger. The interesting thing on Latu is just that, I think he's a developmental guy, but I see, to me he looks like a basketball player. I mean, he looks like a guy who's really athletic, who's going to get better, who could be a little stronger in the legs, but I think Latu in a couple of years could be really, really interesting. Because I see that movement ability that looks unique at 6'5", 250.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing with him too, just you nailed it. Like you're betting on the upside there, and you're betting on the coaching staff and the developmental staff that you have in place, turning this guy into a better player than he's coming. And you want that with any player, obviously coming in, but I think they were willing to take a little bit of a gamble there because I'll be honest, I was surprised he went as high as he did. I think it's a great example of no matter how many mock drafts we do, no matter how many reports leak about where teams like guys, every year there's a few picks where you're like, wow, I didn't expect that guy to come off the board that early. So like I know when I did a mock with Latu, it was in like the 6th round or 7th round, I think. I think that's where most of the boards that I saw had him going. So I also think too, Larry, that sometimes because of the amount of mock drafts and draft stuff we consume leading up to it, it kind of subconsciously etches in our mind like, oh, Cameron Latu is a 7th round guy. I've been drafting him in the 7th round in all these mock drafts. And I think it's just a good reminder that none of us really know what's going to happen until those, picks get announced the day of. Maybe other teams viewed him in a similar light and the 49ers had good intel on it, because I'll be honest, I was surprised a little bit that was as high as they took the tight end that they took.
I had Matt Barrows on the show, and Barrows did a piece today in The Athletic with Scott McLuhan, and it's always one of my favorite pieces. And McLuhan in that piece basically said that he had a 2nd round grade on Latu. So, it just kind of goes to show you that you're right. I mean, hey, wait a second, Draft Network had him there in the 5th round. I don't get it. It's like, well, Draft Network is probably not the same as NFL draft people. So, I mean, that you never know. You never know. The picks that I really liked were like the next 3 when they went Darrell Luter, Robert Beal, D. Winters. In between the tight ends. I like Luter as far as a long arm corner who I think can play right away. And then Beal, you're talking about 6'4", 250 with 4.4 speed, who, did it in the national championship game, came racing around the edge. I mean, you can see the potential there. He led them in sacks. It's funny. We talk about all these different guys. The Niners get Beal in the 5th round. He led Georgia in sacks the year that Georgia's other defender was the first pick in the draft by Trent Baalke. So, I mean, that right there tells you something. And then D. Winters is, they list him here at 6'1", 230. I think he's probably 6 feet, maybe not even. But he was incredible against Michigan in the college football playoffs. This guy was shooting gaps. He clearly sees it. He kind of reminds me of like a Jamie Winborn type, somebody who's super fast and undersized, a former Niner who used to shoot the gaps. And those 3 picks were my favorite 3 in a row there. Give me your thoughts on those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the chance to talk with TCU's defensive coordinator, and he talked at length about D. Winters and how important he was to their program. He, to me, was the least surprising pick of the entire draft. I guess Jake Moody, because that one was kind of telegraphed. But, positional players, he was the least surprising to me because he fit the mold of what the Niners really look for in linebackers. He also had a very comparable profile to Dre Greenlaw in terms of measurables and just like you mentioned, maybe a bit undersized, but you make up for it with the speed. He was a guy that I thought you're at a point in the draft where you want to take the best football player available. And I think D. Winters, you could make a strong case when they did select, was the best overall player available. I don't think it necessarily means that there's a pressing need that he's going to, push Oren Burks and Marcelino McCurry Ball and some of these guys right away. But I think that he is a guy that you can do so many things with. And Joe Gillespie is TCU's defensive coordinator. Coach Gillespie was telling me, at the next level, he's like, I don't really know what the 49ers vision is for him, but I know here we were able to use him in the box. He was comfortable in space. We even used him as a safety that could spin down. He called him a bastardized safety at times that we could spin down. He got really good at shooting gaps. And, I asked him, I was like, he's good at so many things. What's the one thing that he kind of, needs to work on a bit? And he had mentioned it was just block destruction was the big thing that he's kind of working on, and just kind of, pinpointing where you're attacking these blockers and being able to shed these blocks a bit. And Coach Gillespie also coached at Tulsa. So he coached Zaven Collins, who was a first-round pick of the Cardinals a couple years ago. And he's like, I had the same thing with Zaven. Zaven was a first-round pick. So it's not something that's so detrimental that, it's a major red flag or anything. So I really like the D Winners pick. And then actually spoke with Corey Batoon, who is the defensive coordinator at South Alabama, who coached Darrell Luter there. And the thing that was the most interesting, this is another Krug Show exclusive, because I'm actually writing the article today for tomorrow.
Wait a second. Ding, ding. Wait. I got a sounder for it. Krug Show exclusive. We got to have something. Wait, hold on. We got Krug Show exclusive. We could go with a audience. No, that's not. That won't fit. How about this one? There we go. Here we go. If you're a big Niner fan, Krug Show exclusive. Jordan Elliot, Niners Nation, making it rain. All right, there you go.
That reminds me of the beginning of Money by Pink Floyd. So he told me that a lot of the base coverages that they ran at South Alabama was literally identical to what the 49ers are running. And their scheme mirrored itself so much to what the 49ers are doing that he was like, this is one of the main reasons why I think he's going to have success there, is that while a lot of guys are having to absorb an entirely new playbook, a new verbiage, and just a new scheme in general, he's been doing this for a couple years. And the thing that I loved that he said about Luter was his main role there was they had him on the boundary against the opposing team's X, and he was in press 95% of the time. And Coach Batoon basically said when we had him out there, it was 10 on 10 on the field because he was erasing whoever the other option was out there. And we knew that we would scheme the other 10 players on the field because we didn't have to worry about one every time Luter was on the field. So I think the fact that there is such a familiarity with scheme is such a big advantage for a rookie coming in, especially a guy who's, a day 3 pick that might be a little bit overlooked coming into camp, while so many of these guys are going to be a little bit behind the curve in terms of picking up the Niners defense and what they're asked to do in coverage. He's been doing it for 2 years at South Alabama. So I thought that was something that was really interesting, where he's already familiar with the coverages that they're going to be asking him to run with the 49ers because of his experience in college.
I was thinking of a comp because I was doing a comp video, and this guy, when you watch him, he plays big. He really does. You can see that right out. He's got really long arms, and that allows him to play bigger than he is. He kind of reminds me of Xavier Rhodes coming out of Florida State. He's got crazy length, and he's got really good instincts. This guy knows how to play the corner, and is a mature player. So I think there's some really high level traits with Luter, and then Beal. Beal just seems like a great scheme fit too. It's just sounds like the Niners have a pretty good relationship with Kirby Smart and may have gotten some inside intel on Beal. But I think that if there's one guy who has got a lot on his plate, who is in kind of a tough spot, I think it might be Robert Beal. Think about it. You lost Ebukam, Amenahue, and Jordan Willis. If they sign a big time edge rusher, all right. But if not, you're asking Robert Beal and Drake Jackson to absolutely step up and be good, especially Beal at a young age, because they don't have a lot of depth of quality edge rushers. But this kid's clearly got the ability, and if the wide nine, if his role in the wide nine can be simplified to the point where it's, hey man, just get up the field, I think Robert Beal is probably capable of that. I'm eager to see him do it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with him was that, when you get buried behind players as talented as George has had, Nolan Smith, first-round pick, Trayvon Walker, first-round pick. I think they had another edge guy. I'm blanking on the name that went in the back end of the first round last year, if I remember correctly. George's, they're all ending up on the Eagles, funny enough, too. But I think the biggest thing with him is just being able to come in and hopefully set the edge a bit and not be a net negative on the field, because I don't expect somebody to come in from day one and rack up a bunch of pressures and rack up a bunch of sacks when they're being taken where he was taken. But just like you mentioned, we can get to it later. I know you'd mentioned, the title, the worst moves of the offseason. I think one of the most concerning things is the amount of edge depth that the 49ers did lose, because I think one thing that gets overlooked a lot, Larry, is in the trenches, because it's not, a position. It's not positions that get highlighted the way, receivers are. We're not talking about like footwork and hands and some of the things we do with receivers and defensive backs. It's paramount to the success of defensive linemen. And as good as Chris Kosaric is, it's reasonable to expect a guy that was taken in the 5th round is going to have to work on some things like, fine tuning that get off and improving hand placement and some of the things that lead to success at the NFL level. So I'm hoping they have a plan in place where he can take a similar path to Drake Jackson, where if he can't contribute, great, but you're not banking on it to have a successful season. It's more so just you're kind of playing with house money if he ends up contributing year one.
Niners went Big Ten to finish Ronnie Bell out of Michigan at 253 and Jalen Graham from Purdue, the linebacker. They list him as a safety here from Purdue. He's more safety size, but he's a linebacker. I really like Jalen Graham quite a bit. I think he stood out to me 2 years ago. I think both these linebackers are going to have a good chance to make the team. I think, which makes the competition this summer at linebacker intense because you've got obviously stars at that position. You've got established special teamers at that position, and you're probably going to keep 6. And man, you got Marcelino, McCrary Ball ascending, and now you've got these 2 young backers. It's going to be competitive. Give me your thoughts on Ronnie Bell and Jalen Graham. Does Ronnie Bell have a path to make this team? What do you think of Bell?
So I'll be honest, I haven't done enough of a deep dive on Graham to have. You'd be much more in a much better position to offer an opinion on him. So I'll stick with Bell, who I've done extensive work on.
Sure.
I really liked him before the draft. I thought he was a guy where, we get so caught up in measurables. I'm as guilty as anybody. When you see these guys, especially with the RAS scores now, it's so easy to compartmentalize all these athletic traits and the explosion and all that stuff. But he was a guy where you look at all the measurables and they don't really jump off the page at you. But when you watch him play, he's just a good football player. He's a receiver who gets open. He has good hands. Is a willing blocker. He's tough. He's not afraid to go over the middle. I just think he's a guy that because he does so many things right, even if he doesn't have one thing that jumps out at you, he is a complete receiver. And, it's going to be tough because I think the Niners wide receiver depth is a little bit better than it gets credit for. But that was one of my favorite picks in the draft. I expected him to go a little bit higher. And, I know we had talked about Jaden Reed a ton. He was another guy where he went much earlier than I expected. So it's really hard to get a gauge on some of these guys when they don't have the gaudy athletic profile that's, the talk of the pre-draft process where it's like, this guy's such a freak athlete, you have to get him. But the Niners got a good football player in Bell. And I think that that's where he has a chance to kind of separate himself from maybe some of the guys that are a little bit lower on the receiver depth chart where they might excel in one area. Bell, to me, is a guy who has a higher floor across the board, if that makes sense. Like, I think he does a little bit of everything really well, even if one thing doesn't stand out.
How about the undrafted guys? Is there a guy in the undrafted class that you're really feeling good about?
Not yet. I'm hoping to get the chance to see a couple of them first and see kind of how they're moving on the field and then kind of form an opinion. It wasn't like last year, Jordan Mason was the guy immediately where I was like, all right, I think this guy has a chance to be a difference maker. To be completely honest, this year, I haven't felt that way yet. The guy I'm most intrigued by, though, is that edge rusher from North Dakota State. I definitely think that's the guy to keep an eye on at this point. But
Spencer Wagee.
Yes.
I talked to him this morning from his farm.
Oh, nice. How'd that go? What are your impressions?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a really solid kid. He's 300 pounds now. He's 300 pounds. He has a 10-yard split that's it's 164, and Kalijah Cansey's is 162. So this guy's gets off the ball, and he's a defensive end at 300. So, I mean, I can't wait to see him. He was a very productive player. His highlights look good. I mean, he really is moving well. He tore the ACL a year ago, but he bounced back in 2022 with a huge year. You can tell the kid's a salt-of-the-earth person, human being. He said Trey's already texted him, congratulations, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think he's exciting. I really do. I mean, he grew up a Bears fan. The guy that he models his game after is J.J. Watt. And, I mean, you look at that 10-yard split at that size and that speed, and he's got a frame. He's he's not like a tight, bulked up 300. He's like a 300-pound guy that looks very natural at 300. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty exciting player, to be honest. I mean, you don't see guys that are that big who get off the ball that well. I mean, Kalasha Kancey is a special football player. And, what do you think? I mean, how many guys can you think of that you've watched? You've been going to the combine, 6'5", 300 pounds, 164 in the 10-yard split. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that doesn't happen too often. So do you think he's going to kick inside and play 4-eye, 3-tech, or they're going to keep him outside?
Yeah, I asked him about that. I said, you're scheme versatile. I mean, at North Dakota State, he played in the wide 9. He played lined up in 0 technique over the nose, and then he played a lot of 3 technique. And he said here he expects to play more 3 technique.
You can never have too many of those guys, especially after we saw last season. It felt like 6 or 7 of them missed time with injury. So I'm all for that then. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's an intriguing guy. And then the other thing is, now in the NFL, what are you looking for? You're looking for pass rush out of all 4 of your defensive linemen. So you get in a certain part of the game where you're going to see pass. You could put him in there as a defensive tackle if you wanted and rush him as an interior guy and he's just getting up the field. Or, heck, if you're trying to go jumbo on the goal line or something, you could almost play him, opposite Bosa in the 4-3. So that's where he's played. I mean, he's basically played mostly at defensive end. So the guy's going to be intriguing to watch. He's definitely country strong. We talked a lot about the farm. He's got kind of a tragic situation, too, is that his girlfriend in high school died of cancer, of leukemia. And obviously that wrecks a person, and but just a real nice kid, nice family, and going from South Dakota to, I asked him, he made it sound like going to Fargo was like, stepping really out into the big, it's a much different culture in Fargo than it is in where he's from, and I think South Shores in South Dakota. So. Yeah, interesting stuff. People should check out that video. We talked to him this morning for about a half hour, and I said, he wanted to move up the time, and I'm like, yeah, no problem. You got workouts or something? He's like, no, I've got to get on the tractor and help plow this field with my brother. And I was like, whoa. And then I'm like, tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do? And give me some anecdotes about yourself. And he collects John Deere tractors. So, but really an interesting guy. I mean, they have a basketball court built in their home, and he can dunk at 6'5", 300 pounds. There aren't too many 300-pound guys that can dunk. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty athletic, and just an interesting story for sure. Yeah, I think that's going to be a guy to watch for sure. The guy that to me is really the highlight reel is incredible is Deshaun Jameson, the corner from Texas, who's also a return guy. I mean, he is a really incredible return man. So I'm really excited to see him just as a returner, but I think he might be able to make the team as a corner. I don't know if you've watched Jameson at all.
Is he the guy that was a bit undersized? That's kind of why he slipped to that range.
I think he's 5'10", 185, 190, but he's not 5'6".
Okay.
He's not Deuce, whatchamacallit for who just went to the Cowboys.
Kansas State, yeah.
Yeah, who's a hell of a player. We got this one on the Super Chat. MGM Production says, thoughts on Isaiah Winstead's signing? I did see him. I've watched a lot of Winstead in the last 24 hours, just taking a look. He's definitely got footwork, and he's got size, and he's got stop and start. I mean, he really his ability to kind of pick him up and set him down and really keep those feet moving. Very, very impressive kid. And I'll say this, he was awesomely productive this last year. 88 catches, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, but he also runs 4.7. And I don't know too many wide receivers. I mean, we'll see. What did Jawan Jennings run coming out, Jordan? He wasn't much slower than that, or that's about his neighborhood, wasn't it?
I believe so. I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest, but
this guy could be a replacement for Jennings. That, and then I'll tell you the other one that's kind of interesting to me is the kid A-Watt, the running back, Ronald Awatt from UTEP. You should watch him. He looks like a really intriguing running back for the 49ers for sure. And they've had such success at finding these day 3 running backs or after day 3 running backs. To me, almost every running back they look at, you gotta look at twice, just because they've had such success with that position. What did you think? Who did you think was the big winner in the draft? If you can't do these things. You got to wait a couple years before you really know. But who do you think's the big winner based on what you've seen?
It's probably not a popular answer. It's not one I've seen too often, but I really like the Ravens draft, to be honest. I think every year Eric DeCosta comes into the draft. He manages to leave with a few guys that end up being starters and contribute for that team. I love that they got Andrew Voorhees, the guard from USC, so late. He'll miss this season with that torn ACL, but next year he'll be out there blocking for Lamar Jackson as he has another MVP caliber season. I really like Zay Flowers. He was my favorite receiver at the top end of the draft. I think getting Lamar some more weapons was a big move for them. So I actually really like Baltimore. And then, 49ers fans aren't going to want to hear it. Seattle on paper has had 2 really good drafts back to back. And I don't know what was going on for about a decade there, because John Schneider was not having a ton of great drafts. And I think the world of John Schneider. I think he's one of the best GMs in football. And something happened up there in Seattle. There's something in the tap water up there, because all of a sudden there's this magic run on players they've had the last couple of years that hasn't happened since really 2012 was the last time they had a really good draft that would compare to the class they put together last season. So I really like the Charbonnet pick. I think that they have a very dynamic backfield. They added Kenny McIntosh to that as well. And then, you think about Devin Witherspoon and JSN. They were kind of, viewed as the top options at corner and receiver in the whole draft. Seattle got them both. They've done a good job. I think that they owe the Denver Broncos a lot of credit for handing over a couple of premium picks in a trade that looks like one of the more lopsided ones we've ever seen in the NFL. It feels eerily similar to the amount of success that the Warriors have had on behalf of the Minnesota Timberwolves. You can kind of attribute the Broncos with helping Seattle get back in it. But yeah, I really like Seattle's draft. I thought that they did an incredible job, and they may not be quite there with the 49ers yet, but man, they're set up really nice for the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, no, Seattle's coming. John Schneider, look what he did last year. He gets Kenneth Walker, he gets 2 offensive tackles, he gets 2 starting caliber corners. He gets, Boye Mafe. They did a nice job last year and then this year, I thought Witherspoon was one of the best players in the whole draft, the corner from Illinois. And some people say they reached, but the guy's awesome. Derek Hall, incredible edge rusher. They obviously bolstered their O-line with that huge guard from LSU, Anthony Bradford. They got the Outland Trophy winner, Oluwatimi, in the 5th round. Really like that. And then after the draft, I saw they got Matt Landers, the speedy 6'5" receiver from Arkansas. Christian Young, who's a kind of a, I don't know what he is. I don't know if he's a safety or if he's a linebacker. All I know is the guy's good. He played at Arizona, and they got him as an undrafted guy. So Seattle, yeah. John Schneider, him and Pete Carroll, you can say what you want. It's amazing. The Niners got ahead of them, and then all of a sudden they quickly built back up. During the Harbaugh Balky era, and then now it's been the same kind of thing. The Niners have gotten ahead of them, but look, 2 back-to-back drafts, and they've just absolutely bolstered their talent base. And I agree. I don't know if Seattle's on the same par with the Niners, but they're coming. They're absolutely coming. And Howie Roseman, what'd you make of the Eagles going with Jalen Carter? I thought that was interesting. Jalen Carter, some people would say it was too knee-jerk of a reaction to losing Hargrave. Jalen Carter, some people thought was going to go number 1, but a top 10 pick on a player who showed up for the biggest job interview of his career, of his life, out of shape and has kind of a, some baggage as far as off the field issues in the top 10. I know he's a huge talent, but it just seemed like a major roll of the dice from Roseman.
If anybody's got good intel on the Georgia Bulldogs, it's Howie Roseman and the Eagles. So I'd imagine after taking half their defense in the last 2 drafts that they had to have some kind of, assurances that, and I don't want to assume, I can't speak for that young man and his situation, but given the legal problems that he had and the abruptness, like I remember I was at the combine and there was a scrum of about 60 people or so waiting at his podium, and 20 minutes went by, 30 minutes went by, he wasn't there. And then that news broke that there was the warrant for his arrest. He had to fly back to Georgia, get arrested, fly back, meet with teams. I just think that maybe there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in regards to dealing with that maybe caused some of these speed bumps that happened with his, his pro day, his interviews, whatever things were going on. But I also think if you're the Eagles, you're a team where you can take a swing on a player like that because, like, hey, we're pretty stacked everywhere else. They took Jordan Davis, obviously, the year before. So even if Jalen Carter doesn't work out necessarily, I don't think it's going to be a big deal where people are looking back on this, like, how did Howie Roseman take this guy and swing and miss? Because everybody kind of is like, hey, this is a really talented player. Who's going to be the team that takes the risk on whatever rumors there are about character concerns and stuff? So I think it was a calculated risk, if that makes sense. Like, there's a risk with any player, but in his case, it feels like most of the concerns were off the field rather than something that would deter him on the field.
To me, the pick that they made that I was like, oh, man, I didn't want to see that player go there, was when they took the safety out of Illinois, Sidney Brown, in the 3rd round. Sidney Brown's just a really, really good football player, and his coverage is tight. He's smart. He's got a twin brother, but he was the better of the 2 players, I thought. I mean, the running back is not bad, but the free safety kid is tremendous, and he went to Philly. I mean, I definitely didn't want to see that. And then, Philly. I mean, Roseman knows his stuff. There's no question about it. He's really, really good. What's the competition this summer now that we kind of know the makeup of the roster? What's the competition you're most looking forward to this summer?
Is it a cop-out if I say Jake Moody and Zane Gonzalez?
No.
All jokes aside, that's actually one I'm very interested to watch because as talented as Jake Moody might be and as much buzz as he's getting for the things he did, it's really hard for rookie kickers to beat out veterans in training camps. There's been a lot of guys that come in as rookies, don't get the job with the team that drafted them, and then they find success later on down the line. I'd be pretty surprised after spending a 3rd-round pick on him. He would have to be abysmal, I feel like, for Zane Gonzalez to get the job just based on roster politics. But I will be interested to see how that goes because I've never really seen a high-profile kicking competition before. Typically, if you take a guy in the 3rd round, there's not much else in the way of them on the roster. And so I'm really interested to see how that plays out. And then I would say the defensive line in general, I think they're going to have to keep 11 guys this year. They have so much talent on there that some of these guys that contributed last year are going to have a hard time making the roster just based on how deep that group is. There's 16 or 17 guys, I feel like, on the roster currently that belong on an NFL roster at the position, and you can't keep all of them. So I would say for sure defensive line, and that goes for edge and the interior. I would say maybe a little bit more so the interior because I think they have so many quality options there now. But I just that's the person I envy the least on cut down day for the 49ers every year is who has to whittle down that group of defensive linemen, because it feels like every year they enter camp with way more guys that are capable of making the roster than ultimately will. And I know there's a lot of very tough decisions that have to get made in terms of that group.
Yeah, it's a good group. I mean, Bosa, Hargrave, Armstead, Drake Jackson. Let's call that the ones, right? So those 4 guys. Then you got Austin Bryant, Kevin Givens, Javon Kinlaw, Cleveland Farrell. Those are probably the 2s, right? That's 4. That's 8 right there. Robert Beal's going to be on this team if he looks like anything. That's 9. Kalia Davis, that's 10. So that means there might be, if you want to go with 11, there might be one spot for T.Y. McGill, Kerry Hyder, Alex Barrett, and our friend Spencer Wagee. So that's pretty good depth right there. I mean, that's I was thinking they were going to go with 10. So for you to say go with 11, that means they're going to have to be thin somewhere else. It's going to be a very, very deep roster. I mean, obviously the one I'm looking for is Trey and Sam. That's the headliner. But to me, the other one is at linebacker because you got Greenlaw and Warner, and I think Marcelino McCrary Ball is going to elevate and really be something. So I think those three guys are there. Let's say you keep 6. You've got 3 special teams linebackers in Curtis Robinson, Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, and Oren Burks. I don't think you can keep all 3 of those guys because you also have D. Winters, Jalen Graham, and this Mariano Sori Marin. So you got 3 rookies and you got 3 special teamers, all probably so you got 6 guys there competing for 3 spots. I think that's going to be intense. I don't know there. Who would you go with? I mean, to me, I guess I would go with Greenlaw, Warner, McCrary Ball, Winters, and probably Curtis Robinson and Oren Burks. And somehow I would try to go Jalen Graham practice squad or Flanagan Fowles traded. I don't know. You can't go 3 special teams linebackers, could you, with Robinson, Burks, and Flanagan Fowles, and you're going to cut D. Winters? You're not going with 7, but Winters is going to be on there. Do you cut McCrary Ball? I don't know. That's going to be – there's going to be a good player left out of that competition.
Last year I did a piece towards the end of training camp where I talked to Scott McLuhan and I asked him, what goes into roster cut downs and what's the, kind of behind the scenes deal with that. And one of my favorite pieces of information he shared with me was that, he's like, man, as the GM, I always want the rookie to make the roster. I want the guy on the rookie deal to make the roster because it's cheaper. It gives us more flexibility. The coaches always want the veteran. The coach is going to want the guy that they know they're not going to have to spend as much time coaching up, obviously. So you have this kind of power struggle. So what I'm thinking here is you have a guy like Oren Burks who is signed as a free agent, even though it's not a, lofty contract. You have the veteran who's a bit older, who's produced, who I would say has the edge right now over some of those younger guys. But then you think about a guy like Curtis Robinson, who I think, unfortunately due to the injury last year, kind of got lost in the shuffle a bit. I think he's an extremely talented player. And then you have a guy like D. Winters. You have a guy like McCrary Ball. Sorry. So with the 49ers, though, Kyle's the guy that really has the final say. So that's where I think it's really interesting because whereas a GM might be more inclined to lean with some of the younger guys, if they're not showing Kyle and the defensive staff what they need to see, I wouldn't be surprised if it is, something along the lines of, the Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, and then, Oren Burks, I think right now is kind of the favorite to be that third linebacker. And then you have a situation where DFF has experience in the system. He is a veteran. Maybe they feel more comfortable with him. Curtis Robinson is a guy, like you mentioned, who has the versatility to do both. So I, as much as I like some of the younger guys, I feel like with the 49ers, that's a dynamic that I'm always going to be thinking about going into training camp as long as Kyle Shanahan's there, because being the coach that's going to prefer the veterans, I think that he's a guy who might be more inclined to forego some of these younger guys. And I thought McCurry Ball had a good chance to make the roster last year. And, it just doesn't work out that way always when you have that much talent. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to look at things, if that makes sense, that the 49ers might differ from a few different teams just because the coach has such a final say on that final roster.
Where it's really going to be interesting, I think, is tight end, because it's pretty clear. It's Ross Dwelly against Braden Willis, but Willis is probably a better blocker, and it's Warner against Latu. Do you go with the established guys that have been here that you're comfortable with, or do you go with rookies that you're going to have to coach up? In both of those cases, I think I would go with the rookies.
Yeah, and so that's the thing too, is when there's so many dynamics that come into play, but when you're the 49ers and you have to pay all these guys, and there are more guys due for contracts down the line here, you have to get as cheap as possible wherever you can. And as much as you may want to have a veteran guy at a certain spot, you have to think bigger picture sometimes too. And if the gap isn't that big between D winners and a guy that might be a veteran option, you almost have to take into consideration that it's worth it to have the growing pains of the rookie, because that's going to free up the money you might need to sign an impact veteran somewhere else or retain some of your own talent somewhere else. So it's incredible too how the difference in just explosion and speed and recovery time between a guy who's 22 and a guy who's 26, right? Like in the grand scheme of life, you're like, the guy in their 20s, it's not that bad, but the NFL wears you down fast. And I think that there is an advantage to having guys who are a little bit more fresh on those rookie deals, who don't have the wear and tear that some of these guys do on their second and third contracts, that are still relatively young in the bigger picture, but have accumulated those miles on their body in the league.
All right, a couple things before we cut it quits here. So best and worst move, you're going with what?
So I'll start with the worst, because I thought you touched on it, but I still feel very strongly about this. I don't know what went into the conversations with Robbie Gould, and I'm with you. I feel like the only way that they would have let it kind of go the way it went is if he was adamant he didn't want to come back. But I think it's really hard to be a team that's so complete everywhere else and have one of the most pressure-packed positions in the sport be a question mark right now, where the worst possible thing that could happen to me, Larry, is you have this team that wins 13, 14 games, whatever it may be. They go into the playoffs, and then here it is. It's a kick from 40 yards out to tie or win a game in the postseason with everybody watching, pressure's on, and a guy comes in and shanks it and misses it wide right. And you're left sitting here like you had this Super Bowl championship, whatever caliber roster you want to call it, and the guy who is about as automatic as anybody in the league is somebody that walked out the door. So it's hard for me to say without knowing what went in behind the scenes, but I thought losing Robbie Gould and replacing him with a rookie is a huge risk at this point in time. I don't know nearly enough about evaluating collegiate kickers, and I couldn't tell you why or why not. I think Jake Moody is going to be a good kicker right now, outside of the raw field goal numbers we've seen and stuff like that. So I'm not sitting here saying that I don't think Jake Moody will be good. I just think the security blanket that was having not only Robbie Gould, but Phil Dawson before him. The Niners have had a decade of about as reliable of a kicker as you could possibly have. And man, like that's something you don't know how good you have it till you don't, right? And I would just hate to see such a good roster, 52 players deep, deterred because a spot that you've kind of maybe overlooked and taken for granted the last few years doesn't have that same level of reliability. So I would say whatever led to Robbie Gould exiting the way he did would probably be the biggest loss and the worst move in my eyes. And then the best move to me, it's obvious, I feel like, and I apologize for not having a, more under the radar one, but it's getting Javon Hargrave. I watched pretty much every snap the guy took the last couple of years after they signed him. I did an article breaking down all his sacks and just watching all the different counters he had, the ways he was able to win with power, speed to power. He honestly might be one of the 49ers' most dominant interior linemen since they had 94 patrol in the middle 10 years ago. And that's no disrespect to Armstead and to Buckner, who are in that tier as well. But some of the things that I saw watching Javon Hargrave really, really reminded me of when I used to watch Justin Smith, just the sheer power that he would display on the interior and how much of the Eagles' success that they had on the edges was due to the way he was wrecking the interior offensive line of opponents. So I can't tell you how much fun I had watching his film, Larry. I literally spent 2 days in a row, just game after game after game, and the guy was there week after week. And I never expected them to make that signing. I didn't think they would make that big of a splash. And he's a guy to me where you took a team that already had Super Bowl aspirations and he elevated the roster in a way that I don't think any other free agent they could have signed would have. So I think by far their best move was Jed, Kyle, and John getting on the same page and saying, hey, we have a really good team. We know we can win a lot of games. Let's go out there and spend a boatload more money to get a guy like this because he could be the piece that takes us over the top. So I would say for sure it's Javon Hargrave.
I'll go worst move, letting go of Jimmy Ward. He didn't even get that much money. I
Yeah.
mean, have somebody who can bring all sides back together. That guy could play three different positions for you and was a tone-setting defender who was still in the prime of his career, and he didn't make a lot of money. And you let him out the door? I didn't like that move at all. To me, that was the biggest loss. And when they take the field again, I think that's the one that will hurt the most. It's like, oh, where's Jimmy Ward? Oh, that's right. He left for hardly any extra money. So that one I think is the worst move. As far as the best move, I know this is going to, you got to factor in everything, right? And that means you got to factor in what these guys make. I mean, it's easy to. I mean, I'm not putting down Hargrave because Hargrave is the guy, right? I mean, he is the answer. That is the right answer. But I'm going to go with an under the radar guy because I'm just an under the radar kind of guy myself, and I'm going to go with John Feliciano. I just think to me when you look at the numbers of what young quarterbacks do when they get pressure in their face, as opposed to when they don't have interior breakdowns on their line. I mean, whether the Niners go with Darnold, Trey, or Brock, they're going to have to get interior pass protection. And Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, and Aaron Banks really were good last year. I think it was one of the strengths of the team. But just having a guy like Feliciano who's so damn tough, so broad, he's a starter. He can play center. He can play guard, probably either guard spot. I just think that that's a great spot to be fortified in somehow, some way. Feliciano's played his entire career. He always finds a way into the lineup. And, and it's not always paved for him. So I just love the addition of Feliciano because now you're covered. He's so broad, so wide, so experienced, so tough. That was John Lynch described him as a glue guy. He's just he's a guy that neutralizes the power rushers up the gut. You're going to be glad you have Feliciano when you're taking on an Eagles team that has Fletcher Cox and Jalen Carter, because Feliciano is a horse inside. So I still think he's got a couple of good years left in him. I really like that signing. It just makes me feel so much more relieved about their line because we've seen them get to an NFC Championship game with Tom Compton. I'm a real believer in Colton McKivitz. I like Jalen Moore if they would give him an opportunity. I believe in Forster as a teacher. I think Zakel is going to be pretty good. They brought in Matt Pryor. They now have Joey Fisher. The kid from Hawaii, Ilam Manning, is a good offensive lineman. You got to see him this summer. So they've added some good candidates, and they got a good teacher there. So, Feliciano would be the guy for me. Just a super underrated player. Pro Football Focus had a report that said that the 49ers were going to be interested in Isaiah Wynn, or Isaiah Wynn would be a great landing spot. The Niners would be a great landing spot for Isaiah Wynn. What do you think? I mean, they cleared out almost $11 million plus in cap room with the restructure for Christian McCaffrey. A lot of people speculated on a trade. A lot of people speculated that maybe that was to just pay their rookie class. But you got a Bosa extension, which should also create some added flexibility. Why did they restructure McCaffrey, in your opinion? And, what do you think about using some of the money there?
I think they were going to restructure McCaffrey regardless. I think they identified him as a guy who's going to be a core player going forward. And I think that move was going to be inevitable. But we're also at the point now where the Niners have really dialed in with this comp pick formula. And I don't think they were going to do, anything to disrupt the 4 comp picks that they're projected to get next season. So I thought that they were very wise in waiting to free up a bit of that money so that if they do want to use it now, if they go out and they sign a, veteran edge guy with a lot of production, or they go sign an offensive lineman who has a lot of starts under their belt, they're not going to be affected in that comp pick formula, and it's not going to cost them some of that capital that they've accumulated for next year's draft, which they've really turned into an art year after year. They've done a great job doing that. So I would like to see, I still think, I wrote about a couple months ago, but I still think like a guy like Justin Houston would be great for this group where some of the younger guys would be able to learn from him. And he was still damn productive for the Baltimore Ravens last year. Like And it wasn't just, I don't think all production's equal. You have to go and you have to see how these guys are winning and what they're doing. And I watched a lot of his games this offseason, and he was still winning with a ton of power, still really good generating that speed off the edge and turning it to power. The guy's got a decade of experience in the league, so you don't have to worry about him countering. He's got a deep bag of moves to lean on. So I would love to see them bring in a guy like that, because then you start thinking about how deep that rotation could be, and you get into situations where you could have a Justin Houston opposite of a Nick Bosa with Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead inside. And then you could also have Drake Jackson factored in. And you start getting to the situations where it's going to be really hard for teams to throw the ball on 3rd and long. And I think that's always where the 49ers have been at their best, when they've been able to win on 1st and 2nd down. And then you get to a point where you're going to have a difficult time converting 3rd and long, because you literally don't have the time to get these routes upfield. And as we've seen when the Niners have been at their best, the only time teams ever really had success was when they were, getting the ball out quickly and, calling screens and stuff like that. So I would love to see Justin Houston. That to me would be the best possible addition they could make out of the remaining free agents. I don't know if there's any interest there, and I don't know if that's what the 49ers feel like, but if you add him to that group and you start looking at what that would look like on paper, it's a dangerous, dangerous group.
Interesting news note today. John Lynch went on KMBR and basically just talked about Brock Purdy and said that Purdy's there down in Santa Clara working hard each and every day, that they've got him out of Arizona and now working in the complex. And he said, hey, you know what? We're about a month away from seeing him throw, which will be the next phase of the situation. And we'll find out exactly when he starts throwing, basically what the more accurate timeline may be for his return. That being said, since we last talked, the Niners picked up Brandon Allen as their 4th quarterback. What'd you think of the addition?
It's a veteran guy. It's a camp body. Somebody needs to be out there throwing footballs. I don't see any scenario where he ends up making the final roster, but it couldn't hurt. It's a guy who's been in the league, and I definitely think that there's always value to guys who've lived that life and who've been through the things that it takes to be an NFL player, even if they're not, a heralded starter or a big time player. Just having experience in the room counts, but I think it really just boils down to them needing an arm to throw footballs during camp and during the offseason program.
Yeah, and they got to have a guy who potentially could sneak through waivers, and that's probably the kind of guy that would, right? If would a guy like that sneak through waivers at the end of the year or at the end of camp if they wanted to? Could he be on the practice squad at 30? He probably could, right?
Yeah, I think so. Now the rules are different where the veterans can now, I'm pretty sure.
So that would be a major advantage. Tell us a little bit about Niners Nation and what you guys got cooking this week. There's a great article I just read on Niners Nation. I would advise anybody to check it out. And it's by our good friend Kyle Posey, who's a great follow on Twitter at KP_show. And his article is what anonymous NFL scouts said about the 49ers 2023 draft. And these are always great articles because guys, it's a fraternity, and guys are not going to say for, attribution, what their thoughts are. They're just not going to do it. But if you can give them an anonymous thing, yeah, they'll be very honest with you and you'll get some really, really great information. It's one of my favorite articles of the year. It's great. It's a great one. Check that out right now. Jordan, what do you got up right now? And tell us about what you got cooking this week on Niners Nation.
Yeah, so my focus this week has been getting to know the draft picks a little bit better by speaking with their position coaches, coordinators, guys that worked with them every day at college. I like to do that after every draft because I think that these guys know the players as well as anybody. And especially when you're talking to position coaches, they're guys who are a little bit more willing to talk about maybe what some of the flaws are and where these guys need to improve. They know them as well as anybody, coaching them up every day. So while you are going to get a lot of the things that they do right, I've asked each and every one I've talked to, where do these guys need to improve the most as they enter the NFL? And they're very, very open about that and very honest. It's like, hey, this is the thing we've been, emphasizing. This is where I think they need to improve. So I spoke with Jair Brown's position coach. I spoke with TCU's defensive coordinator. That article's up already. about D Winners. Really, really good stuff. Coach Joe Gillespie, I can't say enough good things about him. Extremely, extremely kind guy who went into great detail about why D Winners was such a special player. One of my favorite things, Larry, was I asked him a bit about, kind of just first impressions of coaching him. And he was like, after I dressed the team for the first time, I talked to D off to the side and I said, hey, D, who's the alpha in the room? He's trying to get a gauge on things. And D said, you're talking to him. And I love that confidence. I loved that, that non-hesitancy. He said, you're talking to him, coach. I'm right here. And just some great insight from him. And then today, the article's up with Coach Joe John Finley. He does he coaches tight ends at Oklahoma, also does special team stuff. And he was a pro in the NFL. He played for the 49ers. He played for the Lions. And he knows what it takes to be an NFL tight end. And I thought that he did a great job of elaborating his experiences as a pro and the things he saw from guys at the position at the NFL level and how Braden Willis had a lot of those same qualities. And probably my favorite excerpt from that was, he's like, all the guys I've seen that have had success, they have one thing in common. They have a killer mentality. And I think that he's a guy who has that kind of mentality. So it's a fantastic article. Another tidbit 49ers fans will love is, Coach Finley played with a lot of very good players. And I asked him, after our interview was over, we're still on the phone. It's like, who's the best player you share the football field with? And he goes, Adrian Peterson's 1A, Calvin Johnson's 1B. And he goes, and you're going to think I'm kidding, but Justin Smith is right there with them too. And I know, because I had to block him every day in practice. And I thought that was incredible that, you have two guys who are first ballot Hall of Famers. And immediately he's like, Justin Smith is in that conversation as well. And I think 49ers fans can appreciate that more so maybe than people that didn't get to watch Justin Smith every week. But I thought that was pretty cool. And then I also have an article that'll be up tomorrow where I spoke with the defensive coordinator at South Alabama who coached Darrell Luter. He gave me some great insight into the scheme fit, why he thinks he'll improve at the next level, and then things he thinks he's going to need to work on to sustain his career in the NFL and where he needs to improve the most. So that's kind of where I'm at now, Larry, is just really trying to get a gauge on who these guys are by talking to the guys who've been coaching them up the most the last couple of years. And I love talking to football coaches, especially the college ones, because they are very, very open about the experiences they've had coaching these guys. And it's not always, oh, this is the best player ever and they should have been a first-round pick, and I know how talented
right.
They'll tell you where they need to improve, and they'll tell you the growing pains that these guys went on along the way. So that's kind of my focus. And then I have another one lined up next week about Jake Moody, where I reached out to a former NFL kicker who had over a decade in the league. And, just to kind of be like, hey, what does it take to mentally succeed in the NFL? Like what does it take to thrive at this position that's so difficult to evaluate relative to other ones? So I have big time Jake Moody content coming too. I know that's what the people have been waiting for. So I'm also very, very excited about that.
They're chomping at the bit for their Moody. Biggest concern for the 49ers on May the 4th. Would it be Colton McKivitz in the right tackle spot, or would it be the edge rusher depth opposite Nick Bosa? To me, it's got to be probably one of those two, unless you can make a very compelling argument it's a third thing. Maybe quarterback, I guess. I'd be very concerned if Sam Darnold was the week one quarterback. That would be my other concern. But what do you think? What's the biggest? They didn't get a tackle. It's funny. We talked about this. I said tackle could be this year's safety, where we talk it all up and everybody's they need a safety. They need a safety. They need a safety. Boom. They go with Hufanga. They sign Tayshaun Gibson. They didn't draft a safety. This year they got to get a tackle. And I think a lot of people gave them really low grades because they didn't land said tackle in the draft, though a lot of people like Joey Fisher. What do you think? Is it tackle? Is it edge rusher? What's the concern?
So first of all, real quick, I think it's hilarious what you just said. It's always hilarious to me that what happens is there's a lot of people who do great draft content, right? So I'm not taking shots at anybody, but I do think it's funny that what happens is a site or a content creator will spend months doing pre-draft stuff, and they're like, this team needs a tackle, this team needs an edge, and that team could draft another position who's a really good player, but because it didn't fit their pre-draft need, they will then ding them in the draft grades. And I always thought that was kind of funny, where it's just like, if it doesn't match your confirmation bias, then it's automatically points are deducted and you had a bad draft because you didn't pick the position I thought you needed. So I've always thought that was kind of an interesting part of this whole process. But I would say
it's similar to manager of the year in baseball. It's like if I thought your team was shitty, but then you have a good year, it must be the manager. So, like that happened to the Giants so many years when they had Jeff Kent, Rich Aurelia, Bill Miller. Nobody really gave their guys that much credence. And then it was like, it must be Destiny. And it's like, Dusty was a good manager, but those guys were good players too. I mean, they were just under, so it's like, you're right. What's the old saying? If your premise is wrong, by definition, your conclusion is almost for sure to be wrong, right? And if their premise was the Giants had no talent, then the premise was, Dusty has to have led them there. Dusty did a nice job, but they had a lot more talent. But go ahead. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I just think too, and don't get me wrong, I think everybody's entitled to an opinion. And again, that's not taking shots at anybody. It's just, if you thought the Niners should have taken a tackle and you think they had a bad draft because they didn't take one, I'm always happy to hear out the opinion. But I would also like to hear your opinion on the players they did take. And it feels like sometimes reading some of the draft article grades I've, read, it's like instead of actually grading the picks that were made, they're grading the picks that didn't get made that they felt should have been made. And I think those are two totally different things in a way. Like I'd still kind of like to hear some feedback on the players who actually were taken. And I just think it's kind of unfortunate that sometimes it plays out that way. But I would say right now the biggest concern, it has to be quarterback for me. I just think that the lack of clarity there, I think on paper, it's very clear that in the most ideal scenario for the team, Purdy's healthy and ready to go, and he's the guy when the season rolls around. I think it really can't be made clear at this point that that's right now how they feel based on their actions, based on their words and everything we've heard. But we don't know how that's going to go. And we don't know how Sam Darnold and Trey Lance are going to look. Maybe Trey Lance comes in and has a really, really good offseason. He looks really good during camp. And you're stuck in a position where you're like, man, it was mapped out for Purdy to be the guy. He had a strong end of the season, but Trey Lance looks really good. Or maybe Sam Darnold finds his footing. He was a top 3 pick for a reason too. So I like the options they have, Larry, but I definitely think that I can't think of another team in recent memory that had such a good roster and not necessarily didn't have a great quarterback, because there's been teams that have succeeded with good rosters and not a great quarterback. But just the lack of continuity and lack of clarity at quarterback. I can't remember. If you have any that come to mind, I'd love to hear it. I'm drawing a blank of a team that was this good that didn't have continuity and a clear picture of who their quarterback was going to be going forward.
I mean, I'd have to go back to like those Washington teams that had Rippon and Schrader and Doug Williams. And I mean, they have great teams, but they weren't really sure exactly who the quarterback would be. But, I mean, usually that goes hand in hand. I mean, it tells you a lot of things. It tells you how good a coach Kyle Shanahan is, I think, in a lot of ways, as far as and also how good this roster is. How good a job John Lynch has done. And I think the 49ers have good options, but, I mean, it's just a matter of development and health. And I think they've got good options, though, and we'll see it play out. I said that was the last one, but I'm reading this. I have to ask you about this. Matt Mayoko, our good friend. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I think I saw the comment in there. If it's what I think it is.
NBC Sports Bay Area's Matt Mayoko, our good friend, went on the Murph and Mac morning show on KMBR, and he said, to quote, "Here's the deal. Sam Darnold might be the most, can I say this? The most talented thrower of the football that the 49ers, wait for it, have ever had." Your reaction? Your reaction to that?
Shock and awe, because I think that the first thing that comes to mind is obviously the 49ers have arguably the greatest quarterback of all time, and another guy that is in the discussion for one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But I think, without speaking for Matt, what I think he was saying is arm talent. And I think arm talent versus production and what you've done are two totally different discussions. I think Sam Darnold is a much better thrower of the football than he gets credit for. I don't know that I would feel that strongly that I could say something like that at this point in time without having a chance to watch him up close and in person yet. But I do think that Sam Darnold is a much better thrower of the football than he gets credit for. There's much more to playing the quarterback position than just throwing the football, but the guy has insane arm talent. And when you start comparing him to the quarterbacks the 49ers have had in their history, I think that discussion becomes a little bit more difficult to have in terms of placing him at the top. But I do think people are going to be very surprised, Larry, when they see the way that this guy can spin a football. And it really could be something as simple as he wasn't in an environment that was conducive to getting the best out of him. And no team's done more with less than the 49ers. And maybe it's just a marriage where we're like, hey, this guy's had talent all along. He finally has a setting that can amplify it. But I'll be honest, the best they've ever had, that's really tough when you have Joe and Steve in your history.
I mean, that's wild. He goes on. He talked to Frank Gore, who played with Darnold. But this is what Mayoka went on to say. And then the context, I mean, I would go to Cambiar.com and check it out for yourself, I'm sure. But he said how this whole thing shakes out, nobody knows. But he does things better than Brock Purdy. He does things better than Trey Lance. But also Trey Lance and Brock Purdy do things better than him. And Brock Purdy has already had more success than both of those two guys combined. Anyway, it's an obviously a free-flowing conversation about the Niner quarterbacks. I don't know. I mean, you're always trying, and we're talking, we like to talk a lot about the draft. What is the draft? You're trying to figure out kind of the essence of the player. You're trying to see through his teammates and what's going on around him and so on and so forth and just find out. And to me, the more I watch Sam Darnold, and I've watched a lot of him at SC and a lot of him with Carolina, obviously a lot of the Jets stuff, what I see is a guy who throws a good ball, has good stature, moves really well, and but also has kind of an elongated release, and he kind of brings it from here back, and then it just seems like that. I think that more than anything would be my theory as to why he has so many interceptions thrown, is that I think he's giving the receivers or the corners a little extra run at it, and I think they're breaking on his ball a little bit better than they break on some other guys' balls. That's my read. I mean, I don't think it's decision making. It's obviously somewhat decision making, but I think it has to do with his mechanics. I think he's potentially kind of from identifying where he wants to go to the ball coming off his fingertips. I would like to see that timed compared to Brock, Trey, and all these other quarterbacks in the league and see where that was. Because that, just from looking at him from the naked eye, he just seems to – but I'll say this, his Carolina highlight reel from last year looked like, yeah, I want this guy on my team. I mean, he made plays with his legs. He made a wide array of different throws. He played with tempo. The ball came out on time with accuracy and zip. So I can see why people say there's a lot to like, but I think the turnovers and the interceptions, and not to mention the fumbles, I think, those things have to be factored in. Maybe he'll turn it around here, and I'd love to see it. Wouldn't that be something if we have spent this entire time talking about Trey Lance, Brock Purdy, and Sam Darnold became the next great Niner quarterback? How shocked would you be if that were the case? Honestly,
not that shocked, just because, so this is the thing that's wild in the grand scheme of things, too, is I think people might not have remembered, or just, the Niners didn't take him, so it wasn't on the forefront of their mind. Sam Darnold was pretty young when he came out. So I think that with a guy like him, he's just going to turn 26 in June. He's still a very young quarterback in the grand scheme of things. And not this past year, but 2022, I spoke with a scout at the Combine who works for a team who had a quarterback that came in as a rookie and then took a just monumental leap forward in their second and third year. And I asked him a little bit, about the 49ers quarterback situation and how he projected that going forward. And his answer was pretty much like, hey, man, nobody does more with less than Kyle Shanahan. If you give him something to work with, he's going to get production. We've seen him do it with far less than anybody else. So if he gets a plus athlete there with plus talent, it's going to be dangerous for other teams. And, talent's a relatively loose word because it all depends how we define it. but I think Sam Darnold has arm talent. And if you put him in a system where he's going to have more defined reads, he's going to have more of, I don't say like layup throws, but he's going to have it easier than he's had it at any of his previous destinations. And we've seen like Nick Mullins is on a graphic with Patrick Mahomes and Andrew Luck because of this scheme, right? No disrespect to Nick Mullins. That's always the thing I point to whenever people question the scheme or Kyle Shanahan. It takes quite a bit of legwork from the scheme to get a guy like Nick Mullins on par statistically with two of the better quarterbacks we've seen in the NFL over the last decade. So I'm not ruling it out. I don't think we should expect it. I don't think you should run to the sports book and play Sam Darnold MVP bets, but don't be surprised if the 49ers are decent if he ends up being the guy they have to start, because I think that he has the talent to be a decent NFL quarterback, and we've seen them succeed with guys who aren't as talented as him.
Wow. It's an amazing statement by Mayoko. Hey, Jordan, you're the best, man. We really enjoy your content. Keep talking to all these coaches, man. I'll read these articles for days. The insight that you, Kyle Posey, and others at Niners Nation provide on the Niners, especially at this time of year, really, really, really top notch. I think as good as there is. So keep it rolling, man. And thanks for coming on the Krug Show. Hopefully we'll talk to you maybe next week after the rookie minicamp. Would love to get your thoughts. Are you planning on going down there?
I am, yeah. At this point in time, I haven't, not for sure yet, but I'm hoping to. So hopefully I'll see you out there.
All right, man. Thanks for the time. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
There you go. Jordan Elliot, Niners Nation. Yeah, I agree with very nice. Peace out, Jordan Elliot. Good stuff. Yeah, Jordan's good. Jordan is really, really, really good, and that's all I can say. All right, I've got that one question at the end that I want your guys' thoughts on in the chat. Matt Mayoko, not to throw this out there that much, but this is pretty dramatic. I mean, it's just a very dramatic statement, and I'm not trying to, generate a bunch of controversy or heat on Mayoko at all. But he does things better. Wait, he does things better than. I got to see this quote again. We got to double check. He said this. Here's the deal. Sam Darnold might be the most. Can I say this? That's him saying. He paused right there. Here's the deal. Sam Darnold might be the most. Can I say this? The most talented thrower of the football the 49ers have ever had. Wow. 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 All right. I'll throw it to you guys. Nothing. I don't want to see any anti-Mayoko stuff. Come on. That's ridiculous. He's a good friend. Who is the most, okay, we know Joe Montana is the best 49er quarterback of all time. We know. We know Steve Young is the second best 49er quarterback of all time. Who's next? Who do you got third? You going to go Brody? You going to go old school, Y.A. Tittle? You going Frankie Albert? You going Alex Smith? You going Kaepernick? Kaepernick had a hose. If you're just talking about throwing it, what about Druck? Remember Druckenmiller? Druck's got a howitzer. That was a direct quote from Druck. Druck's got a howitzer. Kaepernick threw the ball. Now, he didn't throw it with a lot of touch all the time, but dude had an arm. He could get it down the field. Alex Smith, no, that really wasn't his game. But he was an athlete. I'm trying to think. Who else? Steve Bono? No. Steve DeBerg? DeBerg could throw the ball if you want to go old school. Jeff Kemp? Who is the best thrower of the football? Sam Darnold might be the most. Can I say this? Only if you want to be a topic of conversation on the Krug Show. The most talented thrower of the football the 49ers have ever had. I want your response in the chat. Either give me your response to that, give me your thoughts when you hear Matt say that, either your thoughts on how he got that opinion, or just anything about that opinion, or who is the most talented thrower of the football that the 49ers have ever had, whose name is not Joe Montana. Because we all know Joe Montana. Literally, the late Dwight Clark and I had drinks one time, and he would tell me for hours, I mean, literally hours, Joe would ask me coming out of the huddle, should I put it on the 8 or should I put it on the 7? Dwight! I'm not BSing you. Dwight told me that. Joe would say, should I put it on the 8 or should I put it on the 7? That's and Darnold with all of his picks, I'm seeing ghost Darnold. He's the most talented thrower of the football in Niner history. Sam Darnold. All right. Your thoughts on that and who besides Joe? Joe's obviously one. I don't need 7,000 people in the chat. Joe, thanks. Joe Montana, thanks. I'm going to go with Joe. Thanks. Besides Joe. The answer is Joe. Breathe. The answer is Joe. Who's the second best? If Joe is the most talented thrower of the football the 49ers have ever had, is Sam Darnold second? And if not, who is? Who is second? That, and also we have one starred chat. Normally I star many, but today I just starred one great comment. We're going to get to that as well. But first, a word from our sponsors, Pig and a Pickle, the title sponsor of the Krueger Show. Check them out, Corte Madera, Emeryville. They're open 7 days a week in Marin. It looks like this.
So New York style sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never going to deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
All right, we're coming down the home stretch on the Krueger Show. Hope you enjoyed Jordan Elliot today. Check out my exclusive morning interview with Spencer Wagey. the 49er undrafted free agent. Did that this morning. Good kid. Good kid. Talked to him from his farm in South Dakota. He'll be in town next week for the 49er rookie camp. Looking forward to talking to him next week. And then later on today, by the way, we got Warriors-Lakers tonight, game 2. Warriors got to get this one. I mean, come on, let's be honest. This is it. They got to get this one. They can't go down 0-2 at home to this Laker team. So we'll be on with you tonight after the ball game. And the whole crew is going to be in the house. Cy, Danny, Rye, Carl Foster will be here, Frank Red, Bay Area Baller. It's going to be a big-time show. So join us tonight after Warriors-Lakers game 2. And note to self, go bet the Warriors on the money line. You know, I'm taking the Warriors tonight. Come on, they're going to bounce back. They're not losing this game. They're not losing the first 2 at home to the Lakers. All right. I don't know what to say. This is the first thought I had when I saw Mayoko say that Darnold was the best thrower of the football. Mayoko, WTF? What? I mean, it's good to be enthusiastic, but do I have to share screen on Sam Darnold's stats here? I may have to share screen on the stats of Sam Darnold just so we can take a look at this. Career. Yeah, okay. Wait, hold on a second here, folks. Let me just share the screen on this bad boy. Oh, my goodness. All right. Where is it? There it is. All right. What are we looking at here? Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, in his career, has played 80. He's completed 58.6% of his passes, or 59.7 career. 61 touchdowns, 55 interceptions. He's got a career quarterback rating of 78.2. So I do understand that. I mean, that's not good. That's not good. That's not good. That is not good. So we'll see. I don't know what to say other than we'll see. Idris, he's no Druck. Druck's got a howitzer. This guy's saying, I'm starting to think that Sam is paying people to compliment him. He's got highlight. He looks good in the highlight reel. He does. He really does. I will say that. Fish and chips. Matt has gone all stooge. Oh my God. No, but I mean, where's that coming from? I mean, based on, I don't know if I can go there. Trock, please refer to Sam Darnold as Sammy Dimes from now on, like Danny Dimes. Should I do that from now on? Sammy Dimes. Oh, that will just annoy people to hell. I'm already annoying. Could you imagine if I go with Sammy Dimes all day? That would be annoying. Okay, Fish and Chips says Frankie Albert threw the ball better. G. Martinez says Darnold's reads are terrible. You says one thing I can say is Sam might be serviceable under a good coaching staff. That's a good point. Fish and Chips. Wait, Darnold does throw it better than any 49er quarterback ever. ... 2 defensive backs. Fish and Chips liking one of my quotes. He doesn't break on other guys' balls. LOL, Larry. Thank you. Yeah, once I said that, I was like, I know. Somebody's going to throw that back at me. You says Darnold, Kittle, CMC, they were together at the Warrior game. It's bonding. Joey Nichols, yeah, the highs are really high with Darnold. Jose Reyes, Mayoko needs to get off the weed. What a ridiculous statement full of BS. Joey Nichols, talking about the highs of the highs, but the lows. But man, those lows. Wow. Fish and chips. Has Matt become friends with Cy? Cy right now is thinking about how he's going to argue about the Warriors tonight with us. Jorge Reyes. Darnold way better at turnovers for sure. He's had a lot. That's the thing. He's had a lot of turnovers. I don't know. Relaxes. Bring Mayoko on. We can get him on here. I can call him up. Fish and chips. Mayoko's a respected Bay Area journalist. Sounds like he's quoting Kyle. He didn't have a quote there. He wasn't quoting anybody. Joey says the most talented thrower is Joe. Correct answer, Joey. Fish and chips. John Brody. That's before my time, fish and chips. Fish and chips. How many fish and chips have you had? How old are you? Joey Nichols. Talking about Joe. Accuracy was unreal. Relaxes. Garcia has left the chat. Jeff Garcia. Lee Gowland from the other side of the pond. Take the comment in context. He might throw a better ball than Montana or Young. But can he get it to the receivers in a tight window? Can he take the team down the field in the last 2 minutes? Okay, well, if that's the case, if we're just going on that, wouldn't Druckenmiller, Druck had a howitzer. There's probably a couple other guys who we're not even thinking of that threw the ball really well. I'll say this, Kaepernick could put it out there, man. He could absolutely spin it out there. Soul certified, he's out of his mind. All right. I don't want this to be a big pile on Matt, but that was just an absurd statement. Lee Ving, 56 starts. 2 teams got rid of him. Sure, they love the arm talent too. Fish and chips is Elvis Gerback. It's not a bad call. Gerback had a very good arm. Played in the big house. Gerback could throw it. Jorge Reyes. Brody. I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it on that one. MF's like, why are people hating on Mayoko? They're not hating on Mayoko. It's just the absurdity of that statement. I kind of put it out there. It's probably my fault. Trock says, are you saying Sammy Dimes has the best arm the 49ers have ever had? Could be. Someone says Chris Winkie. That was hilarious. He did win a championship for my Seminoles. Wasn't he like 32 when he won that? Playing against high school kids? That's like Kramer at the kindergarten karate class in Seinfeld. Mitchell and Ness. It's Larry's subject. MF response to Matt's comments. Yes, I'm the evil person who brought up this terrible subject. Relax says, can we say Mayoko is uninformed? No. Let's not go there. We don't do that. See, that's what we don't do. We don't, as we're reporting from our basement, we don't say that. MF, as far as best arm ever, Niners, McLeod, Bethel, Thompson, Sac State, baby. Stingers up. Bzzz, bzzz. Leaving says Scott Tolzien would be the second best arm of all time. Mitchell and Ness, can I say Alex Smith third when Norv Turner was the OC? Sure. Josh is Y.A. Tittle before my time. Idris is Cody Pickett. I think DeBerg actually had a pretty good arm. You know, I'll give you another one. You know who had a pretty good arm? It didn't work out for the Niners. Jim Plunkett. Jim Plunkett had a pretty good arm. Wasn't very good with the Niners. Idris says, are you a Ken Dorsey fan or stan? I'm a Ken Dorsey fan. I'm not a Ken Dorsey. Joey Nichols, LOL. Oh, man, Dorsey. I like Dorsey. Dorsey's a great guy. And he's doesn't have the strongest arm in Niner history. MF says Nate Davis. It's got to be somebody that we're not thinking of. Who's the obscure 49er quarterback who had a gun? There had to be somebody who had a gun. It wasn't Carmazzi. Don't say Carmazzi. It wasn't Carmazzi. It wasn't Rattay. Probably Druck. I'm trying to think. They had to have had somebody with a really good gun. We got this one. Larry said Warriors in 5. I've amended that. Warriors in 6. No, I'm not sure. I'm not. I think the Warriors are going to win this series, but look at the parade to the foul line in Game 1. That right there is hard to overcome. Very hard to overcome. Who do you guys got tonight? By the way, you going Warriors? You going Lakers? I think Warriors on the money line looks pretty like sound betting advice. Fish and chips. There you go. The answer is Sam Darnold, baby. Let's effing go. Artur Gazarian. But he followed it up with laughing emojis. Lee Gowland trying to make sense of all this. Lee is very thoughtful. He says that is looking at Darnold as a quarterback. The statement was he was the best thrower. That could purely mean he throws the best spiral Matt has seen on the 49er roster. Doesn't mean he's a good or great quarterback. No, I hear you. I know. But isn't it, I mean, if I said that, people would be roasting me. So, I mean, it's... MF says, if Tim Ryan and Papa are hyping him, it's on. Papa's all in on Sam Darnold. He loves Sam Darnold. Dan Collins says Frank Gore had high praise for Sam Darnold. Trock. I will refer to Darnold as Sammy Dimes from now on just to see people flip out. Seriously. Trock, I want you to keep saying in the chat every day, refer to Darnold as Sammy Dimes. Because that will be funny. That will be funny. What if he just balls out and is awesome? What if Sam Darnold truly is the pickup of the offseason? Last year at this time, nobody was saying that Brock Purdy was this awesome pickup. By the end of the year, they were. So things change. Things change. Fish and chips. Funny chats, LOL. MF. Larry, bring Matt on and rip him. Matt and I are friends, man. I'm bought and paid for when it comes to Matt. You know, we used to be friends until this segment. I don't know after this segment. No, I'm just joking. Matty's a good guy. Done many, many, many interviews with him. I know what he's saying. I think Lee Gowland has pegged it. He's just saying that he's the best thrower of the football, and he's just saying that he throws a terrific ball. Can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. I mean, why not? He's on the team. Hope, you know, he's going to probably, I mean, according to Ian Rappaport, he's the likely week 1 starter. I can't even picture that. But I don't know. And Ian Rappaport seems very confident in saying it. Jorge Reyes, he's doubled down on it, tripled down on it. Jorge Reyes says Trey has a damn strong arm. Yeah, what about Lance? I mean, I'll say this. I was at practice last year. I stood behind the quarterbacks a couple times. You could almost hear Lance's motion. He's got so much arm speed. Now, arm speed and ball speed are not necessarily the same thing. I'll tell you firsthand what I think when I see them side by side throwing it this summer. Of course, there'll be like 7,000 other people telling you what they think, but I'll gladly offer up my side-by-side comparison breakdown for you. I won't slow it down, though. I will not. I promise you I will not slow down the motions and read things into, look at this throw. Look at the elbow. Look at the knee. Look at the flex. Look at the quads. Do you see the fingertip? I mean, no, I'm not doing that. If I start doing that, just come get me. Joey Nichols, stretches, not stretched. We got somebody who doesn't want to change the subject, but does want to change the subject. Artur Gazarian. Not to change the subject, Larry, but would you be surprised, as he changes the subject, if Joey Fisher makes the team and is the second on the depth chart behind McKivitz? You know, I talked to Matt Barrows about this yesterday. I love Joey Fisher. And this is actually one of the reasons I'm not sweating the whole Moody in the third round pick. Kuiper had Fisher going to the Niners in the third round. And, I thought that seemed a little high. I thought maybe fifth round, but it doesn't matter where you get these guys as long as you're getting good football players. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to pay a little bit more in a certain situation for a certain guy. It doesn't bother me that they went kicker in the fourth round. I mean, essentially was the fourth round. It was the compensatory picks at the end of the third round. I'm fine with that. Is it a little early for me? Yes. Did I say, what the fuck when I saw that? Yes. But I'm not, to me, I was hoping to get Moody as an undrafted free agent. And I was hoping to get a good offensive lineman like Joey Fisher, a prospect, maybe in the third round. So the fact of the matter is you got Fisher as an undrafted guy and you got the kicker as a third rounder. It's not ideal, but it's all about, do you have a money kicker? I mean, Niner fans are spoiled. We want to see kicks made in the playoffs and made throughout the year. We want our kicker to make every kick. So you got to sometimes pay to play, and Robbie Gould was great, but he has been 18 years in the NFL. There is some physical regression. Maybe the Niners got their kicker for the next 20 years. And if that is indeed the case, or even if that's only half the case, let's say they have their kicker for the next decade, it's money well spent, or it's a draft pick well invested. But as far as back to Fisher, I mean, Fisher's film is impossible to actually grade, but it's entertaining as hell. He's just ragdolling guys. I mean, he's just absolutely throwing these poor Division II defensive linemen into the ground, and he's just burying them. But what I love about him is that after he throws these guys down on the ground, he then goes and tries to bury them. And that kind of go for the jugular is exactly what this Niner offensive line or any offensive line could use. So, yes, I like Fisher. As far as the Niners and their right tackle competition, McKivitz, I think, wins that job. But then you also have Jalen Moore. You also don't forget Burford could kick out there. Zakel, I think, could play tackle. And then you got Joey Fisher. So, and you got Matt Pryor, who's 6'7", 330. So between Fisher, Pryor, Jalen Moore, and Nick Zakel, I think you're kind of fortified with four guys behind McKivitz that could potentially play right tackle. So I don't know that I would buy the Pro Football Focus, talk of Isaiah Wynn coming to the Niners. I don't think so. I think they're going to go they're going to promote from within. That would be my guess. Now, I do think they need to go get themselves a big-time edge rusher. Leonard Floyd, Ngakoue, Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, Jason Pierre-Paul, Jannard Avery. I mean, there's some good ones out there. Frank Clark. Go get a big-time edge rusher. You know how much better the Niners would be if they had one big-time guy? Trade for a Montez Sweat. If I could trade for Montez Sweat, I would do it. And I would give up a good pick next year to do it. You add Montez Sweat to what they have up front, and you could win the Super Bowl. They're that close. They're loaded at linebacker. Excuse me. They're loaded at linebacker. They've got good safeties. They fortified their secondary with 2 or 3 nice additions. Darrell Luter Jr., Jair Brown, Deshaun Jameson, all I think going to make an impact. I think there's a good chance Quantrez Knight plays better this summer. You added Isaiah Oliver, Miles Hartsfield. I mean, they've changed some faces back there, and they're going to miss Jimmy Ward. They're going to miss Emmanuel Mosley, but they've added some talent. So, I don't know if it's a wash. Hopefully it's better than a wash in the secondary, but you're stacked at linebacker. But, man, you lost a lot when you lost Ebukam and Willis and, Willis and Ebukam and Menahue were, 700 snaps. And you replaced them with Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant and Robert Beal. And I just really believe that the guys that walked out of the room are probably net better than the guys that walked in the room. So if they want to, if you're asking me, and nobody is, but if you're asking me, I'd feel much better about the 49ers if they had Yannick Ngakoue. Much better about them if they had Frank Clark. Much better about them if they had Leonard Floyd. They had one more outside edge rusher who was their best edge rusher. See, I like Drake Jackson. I think Drake Jackson's going to take off. And to me, he's a key guy for them this year. And I love what I saw from Robert Beal on film. But Cleveland Farrell only has 10 sacks in 4 seasons. You really can't expect him to sack the quarterback too much. Now, he'll be better here than he was with the Raiders. I don't think there's any doubt. But how much better? And Austin Bryant is going to play in a rotation. What's he going to add? I'm really eager to see the guys I don't know. Spencer Wagee, who I talked to this morning, Robert Beal, Kalia Davis. Those 3 guys I think are going to be interesting. And what does Drake Jackson look like? But if you could add Leonard Floyd to this mix, I think the 49ers are good to go. I think they are. I mean, on offense, they got a bunch of backs. They got a bunch of receivers. They're deeper at tight end. They fortified their offensive line. It's all about the quarterback. And, is Brock healthy? Is Trey improved? Is Sam Darnold come out of left field? They need something to happen at quarterback. Maybe it's just they go back to Brock. Maybe Trey comes of age. Maybe Darnold shocks the world. But that's, to me, the big question on offense. I like the receivers. I like the backs. I live with those tight ends. I'm okay with the line. Would I like one more, big-time right tackle candidate? Yeah, I guess. But I'm okay with what they've got on offense. The quarterback. What does Brock come back and do? Does Trey emerge? Is Darnold going to come out of left field? One of those guys has to carry them. And they got to keep their guys healthy. On defense, if they get that one edge rusher, they're stacked at linebacker. They've got some new faces in the secondary. I think it's a really good roster with one more piece. That's all. That's it. They don't need a lot. I think we all kind of see it. They don't need a lot, but they do need one more edge rusher. If they go to camp with what they've got, that's hopefully Drake Jackson's awesome and has just a monster season. But if Drake's just a little bit better and Beal, plays like a rookie, they could use one more big time guy. And I don't know. I don't know if they can get somebody on a deal, but I'll say this, the market plays in their favor. There's it's May. We're in May, and there's multiple edge rushers of note still out there available. So they've got options if they want to go out in the market and go find somebody. But I would suggest they do, because that to me is the final piece of the puzzle. I mean, as I said, Montez Sweat would be number one. You get Montez Sweat or Chase Young or somebody like that, that would be huge, absolutely huge. But one more established guy would be really, really nice. All right, join us tonight on the postgame show after Warriors-Lakers game number 2. Big day tomorrow on the channel as well. Eric Froton stops by from NBC Sports to do a whole review of the entire league as far as the draft and preview of what's coming up as far as the rookie minicamp around the corner. Vish Kumaran's going to stop by the show tomorrow as well. I haven't talked to Vish since the draft, so we got to get his breakdown on it. But join us tonight after game 2, Warriors-Lakers at Chase Center. Huge night for the Warriors. They don't want to lose the first 2 at home going back to L.A. This is a big one. If they can somehow even this series up, then, game 1 was just a bad memory. They lose this one, it's going to be very difficult to get off the canvas on the road and beat the Lakers in this series. Why? Because Steph Curry historically has not played well at Staples or Crypto or whatever the hell you want to call it. He doesn't shoot it well there. They don't play well there. I don't think you can bank on going there and just piling up wins. You gotta get to the free throw line. Jordan Poole's got to get to the free throw line. They can't have this disparity in the lane. The 3 big factors with Golden State always, They rely on pace and space and making ball movement, body movement. They make a ton of passes. So what's key? Turnovers. Well, the turnovers were fine in game one. What's the second key? Rebounding. They've got to rebound the basketball. They didn't. They were negative in the rebounds the last game. And what's the third thing? Points in the paint. And they got destroyed points in the paint in game one. So the scariest part about game one is the Warriors were plus 45 at the three-point line and still got drubbed at home. So I say drubbed. I mean, it was close at the end. But, I mean, the Warriors had to go on a huge run at the end to make it close. That's a little discouraging. Plus 45 at the three-point line, and you lose, at home to the Lakers. I mean, who looked, the Lakers are amazing. I mean, Pelinka, the job that he did to turn that thing around, very impressive. MF, Larry, do a Giants post-game show soon in the coming weeks? ? Love the dialogue. Can't listen to anyone else. Oh, yeah. No, we'll do Giants. Giants are off today, though. So the next Giants game is Friday. Maybe we can do something Friday. Well, let's see. Yeah, maybe we can do something Friday night. Yeah, maybe Friday night after Giants Milwaukee. Maybe I'll should I get Ned on here? Should I text Ned and see if he can come on tomorrow night after Giants Brewers? That might be fun. Have Ned on there. We haven't talked to him this week. We've been doing so much basketball and so much draft, so much football that we've ignored the Giants. And the Giants, what can you say? I mean, what can you say? All right, but we will definitely do more Giants because, as you guys know, I'm all in on the Giants. All right, have a great rest of your day. Catch you tonight after Warriors-Lakers. Go Warriors. Have a great night. See you later on the Krug Show.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me.